Tube cutting and bending in jewelry making has always been a challenge. You want to use a bent tube as a bail on the top of your pendant. It will look great on your design. It's only a short piece of tubing and it should bend easily enough to finish the job. Then you bend the tube and voila, you have a collapsed kinked tube. In this video, I'll show you how you can cut and bend sterling silver tubing easily, inexpensively, and most of all with no kinks. I'm Greg Greenwood and welcome to my studio. Plumbers bend tubing every day and don't seem to have any problem. What's their secret? They have tube benders that help prevent collapsing and kinking from the outside. These benders work great, but can be expensive and are used on large size copper tubing. As jewelers and silversmiths, we are using a much smaller size tube, and those benders just won't work for us. Tubing is an interesting animal. It looks so simple, but it can be frustrating and complicated. We need to cut tubing into lengths to fit our projects. Should be easy enough with your jeweler saw until you start sawing. When cutting tubing, we are cutting through two sides at once, which can be a problem. You can avoid this by rolling the tubing toward you and cut only through one side of the tubing. But the tubing is hard to hold still and will move and roll, which catches and twists your saw blade. We can solve the moving tubing by holding it with a tube cutting jig. It is designed with a trough or channel, an adjustable length stop, multiple angle cut slots, and a lever to hold the tubing secure. Place it on the bench pin, start sawing, and it works great. But what if you don't have a tube cutting jig? Drill some holes in the side of your bench pin. Slide the tubing in the hole and saw. The hole will keep the tubing secure and sawing is easy. Here's another method of cutting tubing. Use your flexible shaft and a separation disc. Cuts smoothly, but wear eye and lung protection. Don't put your fingers behind the disc and be careful not to catch a trailing edge. Any of these cutting methods will leave some burrs and need to be smooth. You can use a hand file, an emery stick, or use the separation disc or sanding disc. It is a good practice to clean out any burrs on the inside of the tubing with a scraper or round needle file. If plumbers use bending jigs that are too large for our needs, how can we bend smaller size tubing successfully? The secret is to bend the tubing from the inside and not the outside. Here's a steel wire cut from a coat hanger. Its diameter fits just into the tubing. The closer the fit, the better. This wire is too small for the size of tubing. A stiff steel wire works better than a flexible soft wire. Notice the bent curve in the end of the wire. This is the working end and will produce the size of the curve in your tubing. The sharper the bend, the tighter the tubing will curve. Make sure this end is smooth and has no burrs. I like to lubricate the wire with mineral oil, burr life, or wax. Insert the tubing on the wire. Follow it with a small tubing spacer. You'll see why in a minute. Make sure you have enough wire to insert into a draw plate and beyond. If you don't have a draw plate, you can drill a hole a little larger than the wire into a piece of steel. Notice I've put the wire on the flat side of the draw plate instead of the funnel side. This will hold the tubing solid. We're going to pull the wire through the tubing with either draw tongs that have a nice curled end so your hands won't slip off the tongs, or a vice grip locking plier. Grab the wire with the bend pointing up, brace yourself, and pull steadily. The tubing will curve beautifully. The spacer protected the tubing from being dented by the draw plate. The ends of the tubing will always be distorted and can be cut off later. Here's another size bend. You may want a tighter bent tube. Just make the wire end bend sharper. The sharper the bend, the more the ends will be distorted. Notice though how the spacer protected the coil from being smashed against the draw plate. Here you can see how the wire bend matches the curved tubing. On curved tubing, your tube cutter will not work. Your bench pin hole and separation discs are your best bet for cutting the bent tubing. Knowing how to cut and bend tubing will be a big addition to your project designs and your metalsmithing adventure. The more you use bent tubing, the more creative ideas you will discover. The possibilities are limitless. Thank you for watching. Check out my website, greggreenwoodjewelry.com. I'm Greg Greenwood. I'll see you next time.